Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Open Series in Denver. I'm Nick Miller alongside Stephen Garcia. How you doing, sir?
Hi there. Hi there.
Chicagoland player. We know you've played in a bunch of events, flying around, but you came here to Denver. You're originally from here?
Yep.
Right.
From the Springs.
And every time we see you, you're usually playing blue-white control.
Yes.
You're sort of like the Jim Davis. Whether it's good or not, you're playing it.
Yep.
But you're not playing in it today. You're playing an interesting Grixis green deck. Mm-hmm. And you said Jeff Hoagland kind of came up with this creation. Talk about why you're on board, and then we'll go into the specifics.
Well, I hadn't played Magic in a while, and I trust Jeff in a lot of his deck building. And he said he was working on this a lot, and messaged him on Facebook, asked for a favor, and said I could use it. So here we are.
All right, and you say you usually play control, but in an environment where you're not very familiar, you want to try to play something with a little more attack.
Yes.
And this deck definitely has that.
Yeah, very proactive. I don't have to know the format that well. I don't really know what most of my opponents have been doing. Just turning my big guy sideways.
So a Grixis green shell, you got the delve threats that we're all accustomed to seeing. Tasigur, and of course Gurmag Angler. These cards have eternal impact already, so they're pretty good here in Standard.
Yep.
But it wouldn't be a Jeff Hoagland deck if it didn't have Savage Knuckleblade in it, really. So this is the green splash.
The only green card.
Which is why it's Grixis green.
Yep.
And talk about where Savage Knuckleblade's good at. And you said it helps playing from behind, which these teamer decks used to play it couldn't use it.
I think Savage Knuckleblade, the original problem was that it couldn't really play from behind that well, like a lot of teamer decks. It was very proactive, but if you fell behind, they played a Rhino, you couldn't really catch up. But a lot of this Grixis shell, with all the removal, helps you play and win those matchups where you fall behind. So and Savage Knuckleblade is it's a great card. Read it, it's just great. It's 4/4 for 3, pumps up and saves itself, makes itself hasty on turn 4.
Right,
good card.
You kind of describe this deck as playing as more of like the modern Grixis shells do. Of course you have Jace, Friend's Prodigy, and then just a boatload of removal and kind of one-for-one stuff. So you got a discard suite between Duress, Transgress the Mind.
2 Duress, 1 Transgress, and that's it.
Culligan's Command can also work as discard if you need it, but is also there in your kind of removal suite. Talk about your removal. You have a bunch of it, 4 of Fiery Impulse, but then a bunch of other stuff too. You got Crater's Claw, Roast, Ultimate Price, Ruinous Path.
Yep, 4 Fiery Impulse. Originally Jeff had Wild Slash. I wasn't sure why he had that. I sort of don't like dying to Mantis Riders, so I just changed it. 3 of Crater's Claws, great finisher. There are a lot of decks where you sort of peter out because the only threats are the 2 Tasigurs, 3 Gurmag Anglers, and 4 Savage Knuckleblades. So the deck's a little threat light, so if they take care of it, this really comes in handy at actually finishing out the game. 2 Roasts, lots of ground pounders. 2 Colgan's Command, great card, especially because you do need some recursion for your creatures. 2 Ruinous Paths, all-encompassing, and then 1 Ultimate Price. And
Okay. Yeah, because Crater's Call, of course, usually a good removal spell, but when you're beating down with all big creatures like you have, becomes a finisher pretty quickly after 1 or 2 attacks after you've kind of controlled the game. You also got some counter spells here between Stubborn and Owl. Obviously works great with Savage Knuckleblade, all your delve threats, but also Disdainful Stroke, just a really good card in the format.
Yeah, I have 1 main deck D-Stroke and then 2 sideboard. Just hits at least something out of everything, and the games where it hits a lot, it's really great, like game-breaking trading. Same with Stubborn and Owl, it's just so game-breaking trading 2 mana for their turn or 1 mana for their turn.
And 1 of Painful Truths here, kind of way to juice back up. This deck, of course, have all the colors you need.
Yeah, it's very threat light, and the only card advantage is Tasigur and Painful Truth, so I'm sure you just had that in there to refuel a little bit, so you didn't die to people's Abzan Charms drawing them cards and stuff.
Right. An interesting thing, outside of Jace, if you can flip Jace, none of the creatures in your deck die to opposing Fiery Impulses and kind of stuff like that because they're so big. You can blank their removal. And I saw Tasigur you played, just go unchecked a few turns, just generated a huge advantage when, you just didn't have the right removal spells for it.
Yep.
All right. So you kind of control the board, remove everything, beat down with some big creatures. Yeah. Jace is there, just rebuying all your spells.
Yeah. So I lied. I'm basically just playing a control deck.
Control deck with a little bit of more, aggressive slant to it. Your sideboard here is just more removal. You expect to see kind of stuff for the mid-range or the control decks. You, of course, have more counter spells there, but just everything. Languish, Roast, Wild Slash, Radiant Flames, Rending Volley, Ultimate Price, Self-Inflicted Wound. Any removal you need, you have access to it.
Yep.
And then, of course, Disdainful Stroke and some Dispels can kind of shore up the control matchups?
Yeah, control matchups. Dispel's great against Jeskai. That's pretty much it. D-Stroke for the big fatty decks. Actually, D-Stroke comes in a lot. Just after sideboard, people bring in like big fat threats or more removal, so just D-Stroke. Self-inflicted for any white dudes, green dudes. Ultimate Price, really good against the darker red. Not a big fan of like the smaller removals, but we do have those one-man options in Wild Slash. Running Volley again for dragons. I've been seeing a ton of white and blue stuff, Jaces, redundant stuff against Jeskai. Radiant Flames and Languish against the Aristocrat decks. Radiant Flames is really good against Aristocrats. Mono Red, Atarka Red, all that stuff, little dudes, tokens. Languish I really like, yeah, it's good against Aristocrats, good against the Esper Dragons list. And that's all I've sided it in for, but I do like it. The only thing it kills is Savage Knuckleblade if you haven't pumped it up, and Jace if you haven't flipped it, but otherwise Languish works really well in the deck.
Yeah, outside of those, Languish is very good because your delve threats get to stick around. You can even return Knuckleblade to your hand or make it bigger if that's what you want to do before you cast it.
Yep, one-sided board wipes are very powerful. So
you're 4-0 so far. What are you looking to beat up with this deck, and is there anything you're kind of trying to dodge?
As I said, I'm just returning from a long break of Magic, so I'm not super sure about what I'm really preying on. I know that I love to face control decks with this deck. Just trading a one-mana Stubborn Denial for their board wipe, just soul game breaking. Jeskai seemed like a good matchup. I have pretty good removal suite for their threats, and all of my stuff is pretty easy to stick in there. Other than that, I'm not really sure. I faced a ramp deck that was a little close, but it seemed like a good matchup.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you got the counter spells, you got the removal, and you got the beatdown.
Yep.
I think that's all you need. Stephen, thanks for joining me here in the sideboard.
No problem.
Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all week long for the action here in Denver.